I was only 18. I'm covered in blood in the back of an ambulance as we're rushing to the hospital on the wrong side of the road. And I'm thinking, God, I think this could literally be the end. My name is Richard, and in the next couple minutes, I really want to share with you my testimony of how I came to know God. Even though I was so arrogant, even though I was very scientific and logical, against all odds, I came to know Jesus, and that resulted in not only me building an extremely successful career in business, but it also led to me meeting the woman of my dreams, living in the home of my dreams. And this is by no means a prosperity gospel. I think it's very clear. This is not a you believe in Jesus and you're going to have everything you want in life, but it is a very clear example of what faithfulness and diligence and trusting in God's plan in your life, what that can result in. And it all started when I was a kid. Look, I do not come from a Christian family. Both of my parents are Chinese immigrants that came from communist China, where there literally is no religion. In fact, in communism, it literally states that nothing can be above the governmental states. Now, my parents were introduced to the Christian faith because they didn't speak English that well, and so they were actually invited to a Chinese American church. And at first, they went for the free food and the friends and the community. And after a couple years of going and getting to know, my dad was still very hardcore atheist. My mom eventually accepted the Lord into her life. And that was when everything changed within our family. Just because you memorize Bible verses and you sing the children's songs, the Bible, that's a book for me. Like, I did all of that when I was a kid, and I never fundamentally understood what it means to be Christian. That takes me to the second phase of my life, which is what I call the realization phase. Before you can authentically follow Jesus as a Christian, you have to fundamentally understand this one truth, which is that you're a terrible, terrible person. To be quite frank with me, I had this ego growing up when I was a kid because I didn't do drugs and I didn't say bad words and I got decent grades in school and I listened to my parents. Being that star child, the problem is you never actually fundamentally understand what it means to be a sinner. Even though I didn't know at the time, I started to develop this ego about me of like, oh no, I'm a Christian, I'm a good person. And there was almost this condescension of, oh, you don't go to church? You don't believe in God? I'm not gonna spend time with you because my parents told me not to and the church community told me not to. And this is where like Christians get that bad rap, right? Like a lot of my non-Christians friends be like, well, yeah, dude, I would never really hang out with people who go to church because I just always felt so judged. And it's just so sad because I used to be one of those kids. And what happened in this realization phase in my life, when I was 17 years old, I was a senior in high school and I finally started dating a girl for the first time. And it was a very serious relationship. You know, we crossed that sexual boundary very early, a couple months into the relationship. And then I started having very jealous thoughts. I started having very insecure thoughts. I started raising my voice, started getting really aggressive and say really terrible things in that relationship. And long story short, that year-long relationship ended when we went to university separate. And she broke up with me and she said, Richard, I just want to let you know the reason why I am leaving you and dumping you is just because of how terrible of a person you are. And I remember hearing that at 17, 18, just realizing that whole construct of ego and arrogance that I think all of us have to a certain degree of, oh, but I'm a good person, right? I love, when agnostics and atheists go, like, oh, I believe in humanity. We're all good people. We're not good people. Old Testament Jeremiah, in that book, there's this verse that goes, the heart is so sinful and wicked. Who can understand it? Who can understand it, man? And for the first time in my life, which I'm so thankful now that I got that lesson at a young age, if I could hurt another person with my words, and I can experience jealousy, and I could experience insecurity. And I didn't have some kind of trauma where my dad beat me and my mom left me and, I starved as a kid. I didn't have that. I grew up in a middle-class family. I was not abused by my parents. I didn't have like any external factor that caused me to somehow grow up as an evil kid. And if I grew up in this very secure Chinese-American church community, everything around me was just all sunshine and bubbles. Why is it that I was such a terrible person on the inside? And that was when I realized when I was 18 and I remember going to this church retreat. And I remember the pastor saying, you cannot become Christian. You cannot truly have a relationship with God if you do not understand fundamentally that you are a broken sinner. The way that I coped with that breakup at 18 was I got into porn. I felt so rejected by a woman that I really cared about, but because I was so rejected by her, I needed to find the comfort from something else. And so I remember 17, 18, I watched porn when I was a teen, but it got like really, really bad to the point where I was watching pornography 1 time a day, 2 times a day, something I'm still very ashamed to admit of. It's why if you go to my YouTube channel, I've made multiple YouTube videos talking about how I was able to become porn free after about 6 years of battling that. And if you're a guy, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You looking up some really, really dark stuff that if you said out loud the titles of what you're looking at, you would probably be like, I am going to hell. That's exactly how I felt. All of that, if I could just package and summarize that into one phrase, at the age of 18, I found out who I really was, a broken sinner. We always talk about Jesus died for your sins. Jesus died for your sins. I get why someone had to die for my sins because I'm really messed up. And I finally understood that in this realization phase of my life. And that transitions me into the next phase, which is what I call the 911 wake-up call. I was studying to become a doctor when I was in university. And so when I was 18 years old, I was so heartbroken. I didn't really want to go back home to winter break. Christmas break was 3 weeks long because I would run into all my friends, all my mutual friends with my ex-girlfriend, and I did not want to go back home. So what I did was I signed up for a paramedic school and I did an accelerated camp, which normally takes 3 to 6 months. I did it in 3 weeks and I got my EMT, my emergency medical technician license. And that summer I got a job and I specifically chose the most dangerous, crime-infested neighborhood in Los Angeles where I was going to school because I wanted to see the other side that I'd never seen in my life. So I got assigned to an ambulance unit paired with a police department, a fire department in Compton, South Central LA, Inglewood, just the nastiest, most crime-ridden, drug-infested, gang-involved cities. Nothing against those cities. Very good people that live there. There's just, unfortunately, there's just a lot of crime. There was this one summer day. I'll never forget this day because it was the month that I was about to turn 19, but I was still 18. Yeah, I never really shared this publicly because it still shocks me to this day. But basically, we get this ambulance call, and it's something I never heard on the radio before. But it's like, hey, you guys are the closest unit. You have to respond. It was an auto pedestrian accident. And what that means is a car hit a pedestrian, a person crossing the road. And if you can imagine, a car hitting a person is never really a pretty sight. And so we were actually really close on scene. In less than 2 minutes, we got there. And basically, there was a drunk driver in the middle of the day, 4:30 p.m. in the afternoon, right before rush hour, and a drunk driver going 60 miles an hour in a residential area runs into a kid with a bicycle crossing the street, coming back home from summer school, 16 years old. And if you can imagine a car hitting the side of a bike, which then hits a kid that's going 60 miles an hour, you can imagine the damage that happened. So we're the first one on scene. This kid is bleeding out. He somehow is still conscious. He's screaming. Basically, the handlebars of the bike were the first impact to hit the car, and then the bike is what hit him. The handlebars turned 90 degrees and then carved up his stomach as if it were a knife. And so and a handlebar isn't sharp. So you can imagine how much impact there was to turn that handlebar into a knife. It stuck up his belly button, and then it flew all the way up past his nipple line. And basically his entire body was opened up 3 or 4 inches. And I could see basically his intestines. Left knee is completely shattered open. I see his yellow kneecap because that's the color of what your bone looks like. His right tibia, his shin bone here, is split completely in two. When I lifted up his tibia, it just separated, and so I had to stabilize it. And he's screaming here, "Mom, mom, mom, I need my mom." And we're trying to calm him down because he's losing blood. And I know in probably about 90 seconds, if we don't get this guy in the ambulance and send him over rapid transfer to the trauma center, this kid is going to bleed out to death. So we're getting his IV set up so we can start injecting fluids to keep his blood pressure up because he's losing blood really fast. So we load him up, and now it's rush hour. It's 4:45 p.m. The car is in LA traffic. We're stuck on the 5, so we're driving on the wrong side of the road. The driver at the front's honking. I'm in the back with the paramedics, and we're trying to make sure this kid doesn't bleed to death just so we can get him a fighting chance at the hospital. I remember when we're giving a radio report, and so we have to figure out how old is this kid. So I'm searching his pockets. I find his wallet, and I look at it. Just has his driver's license. He's 16 years old. I'm like, dude, I'm 18. I'm just about to turn 19. I'm literally just 2 years older than this kid. This could have been me. This kid was literally coming home from summer school, doing extracurriculars. He probably gets good grades. He's probably doing some extracurricular class. He's probably trying to spice up his resume so he can get to UCLA just like I did and get out of this terrible crime-ridden neighborhood that he's in. He just got unlucky that day. The unfortunate thing about being in emergency response is you never actually get to see the outcome of these patients, because as soon as you drop them off in the hospital, you're on to the next 911 call. I just remember as I was coming back to the ambulance, and the driver, my partner, was wiping the back of the ambulance, and it was just covered with this kid's blood. Like the whole, you couldn't even see the floor. It was like a metal normal. It's like shiny silver metal, stainless steel. It's just covered in red and yellow because it was like his fat and like all. It's just very disgusting. Lipid deposits accumulating on the floor. And I remember my ambulance partner wasn't even wiping. He was just there with his hands in his head. He was just like, dude. And he was looking at me, and then we both basically were thinking the same thing. We said, this kid was only 16. And my ambulance partner was 21, I was 18, and I was like, that could have literally been me. The reason why I call this the 911 wake-up moment was because I think that when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, you never think about death, man. We think we're invincible. We get blackout drunk in university. We do the stupidest stuff. We put the dumbest things in our body. We eat the most terrible things, and we wake up the next morning, we bounce up because we're so young. And we don't realize the consequences, and we also don't realize how quickly it could just all end just like that. And up until this moment, I had not fully committed and dedicated my life to Christ. I think at this point, if I had died, I would not be in heaven. And for the first time in my life, I realized, dude, this could all end tomorrow. And yeah, all my best friends in college are partying it up and in the fraternities and drinking and getting drunk and hooking up and doing whatever they want to do. I kind of grew up going to church. I get this part where I'm a sinner, but I didn't actually come to terms with God. Is this truly the God that I want to believe? Basically decided I'm not going to go another few months, no, another week without knowing what is going to happen on the other side, because tomorrow I could die. And so now I had the level of urgency. And so for my second year in university, I spent about 6 months intensively studying Christianity, Judaism, Jews, right? Islam, and Mormonism, kind of the big four in terms of the monotheistic religions, because I knew that there was a God. I knew there cannot be a world in which all of this that we live in was not created by one higher power, one single source of truth. But I just didn't know who that God was. About 6 months of attending different Sunday services, talking to different priests, different leaders of different faiths, that I really just had this one experience where I was just back to back pressed against a wall, and I came to this realization: Jesus is the only way. I realized that this was the only faith in which I didn't have to earn anything in order to receive forgiveness. And that was just something that I could not find in any other faith besides the faith that I grew up in, which was coming to a relationship with Jesus. I really started to understand who Jesus was, and then I made that decision that I'm going to follow Jesus for the rest of my life. And then on top of that, not only did I have an epiphany when it came to my faith, I also started to question, well, if I'm going to die one day, and I could die at any point, do I actually want to be a doctor and dedicate my whole career and another $200,000 in student debt to becoming a doctor? And after shadowing doctors that entire summer, working in the ERs and volunteering in hospitals, I realized I don't think that this is the plan that God has for me. At least I don't feel this calling or this passion. And I had always seen all of these young people making money online, traveling the world, having freedom, being generous with their money. And I realized, man, there's got to be a way to be able to make money with online business and do so in a way that can impact and serve people. And that's why I started experimenting with this path of maybe I could start an online business and create freedom that way. I've tried all this stuff. If you've started an online business, that you've probably tried. I tried a dropshipping business. I tried starting my own agency. Borrowed money from my dad to buy an ATM and place that ATM in a barbershop, and that ATM ended up getting robbed. And I just failure after failure after failure. I was really praying hard during this time. At this point, I'm very clear. I'm a believer in Christ. I know that God has a plan for me. I'm not sure what that plan is for my life, but I just feel it's not to be a doctor. Basically, I was stuck trying all these different businesses, and then I did a summer abroad term. And this is the summer right before I started studying for the MCAT, which is the 7-hour exam that you have to pass and do really well to get into a good medical school. So I knew I have to make a decision here, because if I don't get a clear answer of whether or not I'm going to go all in or not, because I'm an all in kind of guy, I'm either 100% or 100% out, I'm not going to dedicate my life to studying for this MCAT and go to medical school. So I had this summer where I was abroad in England, studying to fulfill on some credits, just to fulfill on a physics credit. But the reason why I really wanted to travel and study abroad was because I wanted to get myself out being in my home environment. And there was this fitness company founded by a guy named Ben Francis, which I'm sure you've heard of, called Gymshark. Back then, they had just crossed about $200 million a year in revenue. They're about 6 years old as a company. I think today they're a multi-billion-dollar company. And this whole summer, I had been praying every single day on my knees in my devotional. Right before I go to class in this university in England, I would say, God, I'm studying this physics, which I have no interest in, and it's to ensure that I fulfill my credits so I can graduate and go to medical school. But Lord, could you just show me as clear as night and day? Like, I know it's unlikely, but God, if you could just write words in the sky and have clouds appear and say, Richard, don't go to medical school, become an entrepreneur. If God, that is the will of my life, I will become the best freaking entrepreneur. And Lord, if you want me to be a doctor, then show me as clear as night and day that becoming a medical doctor is the path, and I will go all in. And next year, I will forget about this entrepreneurship stuff, and I will go all in on studying for this medical exam, this MCAT, and become the best doctor to glorify you. Because at this point, I just want to be a soldier. I just wanted to serve God with whatever it is that His will was for my life. In the last weekend, I don't know what it was, but after finals, every single student went out partying, went out to the pub, because we're 18, 19, but we're legal in England to drink. I just decided, you know what? I feel this massive calling. I've looked up to this company called Gymshark, It's halfway across the UK, 5-hour train ride away. And so I took a train ride and I spent all my savings. I had like $150. The train ride was $120 round trip. And I took a train ride 5 hours on a Friday afternoon, the last weekend in England. And I networked my way from the front desk secretary who tried kicking me out because there's a random Chinese 19-year-old kid demanding to meet the owner, Ben, of the company. And he said, Ben's not even here right now. And I networked my way from him. And basically the way I bought time was I said, I'm a student studying entrepreneurship, which is true. I was taking some entrepreneurship classes. And one of my projects is to interview successful companies and the employees of successful companies to see what their experience is like and why their company is so successful. And so I bought 20 minutes of interview time. And right before the assistant was about to kick me out, I said, is there any way I can meet your manager? And he was like, oh my gosh, this kid's just trying to buy more time. And in that very moment, a manager walks through the front doors. And he's like, oh, well, yeah, she's right there. And I interviewed her manager. And then that manager, I knew it was about to end. And I asked, is there any way I could interview the other person? And at that point, the sponsorship manager comes on through. And then I interviewed that person. And basically 4 or 5 hours of me inside of this headquarters, word had gotten around that there was a 19-year-old Chinese American kid who randomly showed up as a student here to interview because he really looked up to this company. And word had gone to the owner of the company. And while I was having lunch with one of the 6 executives of the company, one of the chief people officer, he pauses and he points his finger behind my back and says, the man you're looking for is right there. Ben Francis just got to the headquarters off some meeting. And I sat down with Ben Francis, the owner of that company. He's 26 years old at this point, running a $200 million a year company, and he sat down with lunch with me, and I had a conversation with him for 90 minutes. And what he told me in that conversation changed my life forever. I said to him, Ben, how did you take a risk and drop out of university to start your business? That was the first question I asked him, and he gave me a really good answer. He said, look, man, the biggest risk that you can take is not taking a risk. That's what he said. Because the thing is, when you're young and you're 19, you're 20, you're 21, if you fail the business, what's the worst thing that can happen? You can always go find another 9-to-5 job. You can always go back to school, right? The biggest risk is not taking the risk, is what he said. And then I don't know what was in my heart, but when I shook his hand at the end of the conversation, the words just naturally left my mouth. I said, you've inspired me to dream a bigger dream. You got that? I want you to remember those 2 things. Him telling me to take a bigger risk, and then me telling him that he inspired me to dream a bigger dream. 48 hours later, it's now Sunday. This is the last day that I'm in England. I go to the city of London, the capital, and I go to a church, Hillsong, popular Christian church. I wanted to check it out. I heard it was really famous. And what was so funny was that was the one week in that entire summer that they actually flew in a guest pastor to speak. And the guest pastor was actually a pastor from Los Angeles, which is so weird because the next day I was flying back to Los Angeles. That's funny coincidence. And his pastor was very old. He was 86 years old. He was just about to retire. And it was a very powerful message, incredible pastor. But at the very end of his message, he said, there was once a young man that asked me, what were the 2 biggest regrets in my life? And he wasn't answering a question. This was just part of his message. He said, the way I answered that young boy, I want all of you guys to know right now. The 2 biggest regrets of my life were that number 1, I did not take a bigger risk. And number 2, I did not dream a bigger dream. And I knew right then and there, that was God saying, Richard, I want you to take a risk here, man. I want you to go on entrepreneurship. And I remember I broke down into tears crying. No one, like the people around me, like, why is this kid crying? Because yeah, that was inspirational. Couldn't be that inspirational, right? But for me, I was crying because I knew that this was the answer to the prayer that I had had for that entire summer. I called my parents on the flight back to Los Angeles. I said, Mom, Dad, I respect and I want to let you know that I submit to your guys' will, but more important than your will is God's will over my life. And I shared them the story of everything that happened. My dad was the first one to respond. He was super anxious and worried, and rightfully so. He'd invested his whole life to making sure that I would be able to take care of myself and provide for my family. But he said, Richard, at this point, he was already Christian. He said, as much as I want you to be a doctor, God's will is greater than our will for your life. And if that's God's will for your life, then we trust that that is, then we submit to that. And we support you fully. And that takes me to one of the latter phases now. And we're coming close to present day. The next phase, which is what I call the suffering. Now, the reason why I say it's the suffering was because I bought a lot of courses. I fell for a lot of these YouTubers that were saying, make 10K in 30 days if you do this, probably the same way that you did. And I failed a lot of businesses. I remember I was working on a dropshipping business, and it was a grind, man. Like, I'm going to school. I didn't drop out of school. I was still finishing my medical degree. I did not have money for Facebook ads because back then we had to spend $50 a day on ads to send traffic to a random product I was selling, jewelry, bracelets. And what I did was I would charge these electric scooters, Bird scooters, Lime scooters, every single night at 8 p.m. I would go all around the college campus and I would pick up all of these electric scooters, load them up into the white Honda Accord, which I still have to this day because it reminds me of where I came from. And that old 2010 Honda Accord, I would load them up, take them back to the apartment. I would charge them in the parking garage, which I was so scared for my life I was going to get robbed because at nighttime at like 9 p.m. in the dark parking garage, there's no one there. And then every single morning at 4 or 5 a.m. I would wake up, I would pull out the scooters and drive all over the LA campus, dropping off these scooters in the designated area because I got paid $5 for every scooter that I dropped off. So for 6 months, I had no social life at nighttime because I had to go pick up scooters and I couldn't sleep in because at 4 or 5 a.m. every single morning, I had to go drop off freaking scooters. And that was how I made $45 to $50 every single day just so I could pay the Facebook ads so that I could run these ads. And here's the saddest part. I never got those ads profitable. So I paid Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook every single dollar. So Facebook, Meta, they're happy. I paid them the $50, which, that's, nothing to them. And then the worst one was I borrowed $2,000 from my dad. And my dad, unfortunately, just got laid off from his job, but it was because I had this awesome idea of starting an ATM business. You ever see those ATMs in a barbershop or like a cash-only business? Every time you use that ATM, they charge you like a $2 or $3 fee, right? So if 10 people use that ATM and it's a $3 fee, you make $30 per day. I was making like $200-300 a month, and I was like, whoa, this is so awesome, making passive income. And it gets robbed. All the money was stolen out. Someone planted the explosive device, and it was just like, even though it was not that much money, I knew it was such a shame to my family because I borrowed a lot of money to my father who just got laid off. I worked so hard and I lost all that money. I call this the suffering phase because I was so angry at God. I remember talking to God during my devotion in the morning and prayer. I'm like, God, you literally showed me 6 months ago when I was in England inside of this room and there was worship music going, I felt so spiritual and I had goosebumps and everything felt so like this is God's plan for my life. Why is it so hard? I realized that just because it's God's plan, it doesn't mean it's gonna be easy. You with me? That was the biggest lesson I had from that. You realize that Moses, after the Israelites suffered as slaves for 400 years, after they crossed the Red Sea, they wandered in the desert for 40 years. Now, that was because of disobedience, but nonetheless, they wandered in the desert for 40 years before they got to the promised land. Yes, there was a promise from God. There was a promise that God was going to take his people to a very, very beautiful land, right? The land of milk and honey. But that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be any trials and tribulations along the way. And that's the lesson that I really learned from this, which is after I had this come to Jesus moment of entrepreneurship is the right way and you can drop out of medical school, Richard, go all in. I suffered for another year of failing business after business after business. And time is running out because I got about a couple more months and then I graduate from university. What the hell am I going to do with my life if I can't go find a normal job? So the lesson that I realized that God was trying to teach me is the next phase of my life, which is what I call the finding the mentor phase. Because what I realized is that I had been self-imposing a lot of this failure on me. What was that self-imposed failure? I was buying courses and I was arrogant and I had ego and I would watch YouTube videos for free and I would say, oh, I'd find that information in a book, and I never actually had a mentor. I didn't have someone who could show me the ropes, take me under his wing, show me step by step how to actually build a business the right way. And I came to this massive aha moment going, wait a second. All these guys teaching dropshipping, teaching ATMs, teaching agency, they're making their money selling freaking courses. They're not making their money doing the thing that they're doing. Maybe they're making a little money, but they're making their money selling courses. And I realized there's a massive wave that's about to happen right now, which is a digital product wave. People selling digital products, not just on how to make money, but I knew people who were selling fitness courses. I knew people that were selling courses on how to do cooking. Heck, even in university, there was an elective at UCLA teaching how to create digital products. It's like, dude, there's gotta be some new trend happening, which is learning online and selling digital products, what I call the creator economy. And it took all this ego before I finally realized I have to find a mentor. The way I found a mentor was I found someone who had Christian values, who had the same values as me, who had the same work hard, high performance ethics, and put his family first. And I found that in a mentor. And basically I worked for him as his assistant for about 6 months, 3 months for free, another 3 months for minimum wage, $12-14 an hour, in exchange for him showing me and mentoring me and guiding me. And he helped me start my own company. And it was because I really wanted to learn how to sell digital products. And so the only digital product, even though I had so many limiting beliefs, I couldn't teach you how to make more money because I wasn't making any money. I couldn't teach you how to have a better relationship. I couldn't teach you how to, be super into fitness and lose weight because I wasn't that fit. But the one thing that I did know how to do was how to wake up early, was how to be more productive in school. Because I had to do all that because I was doing all these different side hustles, but I knew I still had to do good in school to graduate, so I knew how to wake up early. And because I was charging the scooters late at night and early morning, I knew how to be high performance and wake up on time and go to sleep on time. And so I literally made, and the price was so scary, but I priced it because my mentor told me you gotta price it at this. I priced it at $500. And I sold the course teaching college students how to wake up earlier and be more productive. In the year that I graduated in 2020, 1,000 people bought that course. And it was actually a really good product because I delivered and I taught everything I knew. You do the math, 1,000 times 500 is $500,000 in sales. And that year changed my life completely. I had so many friends in college, and the parents of my friends in college that started asking me, Richard, how did you make $500,000 selling knowledge? And it wasn't even one of those make money online with dropshipping kind of courses. It was actually a really good ethical product teaching something that you're passionate about. And I realized there was such huge demand for my friends, I decided to help a few of them. And I created another coaching program. This time, and again, I was scared to price it at this, but my mentor, because I had a mentor who pushed me and challenged me, he said, Richard, if you can teach them how to make $5,000 to $10,000 a month, indefinitely for the rest of their life, don't you think it would be worthwhile for you to charge just 1 month of fee of their revenue, $5,000 to $10,000? He told me to price it at $10,000. I said, there's no way I can't price this thing at $10,000. So I priced it at the scariest number I knew how, $5,000. And in 2021, when I was 22 years old, 1,000 people bought that program. And so my business that year, if you do the math, 1,000 times 5,000, my business did $5 million in sales. And that completely changed my life. And that business of educating others on how to do exactly what I did, sell information, sell digital products, continue to expand. And now that is over an 8-figure company. You know, what's so cool about that company is I have helped so many people, like Lucas, a college student. He was really passionate about video games. And so he asked me when he was 18, freshman in college, Richard, I gotta pay my tuition. It's $70,000 a year at a really expensive private school. My dad's gonna stop paying for my tuition starting next year. I have to figure out a way to make $70,000 this year. Do you think you can help me? I said, dude, you love playing a video game. It was called Rocket League. Do you think you can make a course on that? He said, yes, I could. He made $31,000 his first month selling a $600 course on how to play a video game called Rocket League to a broke audience of high school kids and university kids, the same way that I sold to university kids. And seeing examples like that, I decided to launch a private equity firm, which is just a fancy way of saying a company that buys a percentage of the smaller companies and invests into them, because I had a couple companies that were getting the $50,000 a month, $100,000 a month, and I wanted to invest into those companies, consult with the owner, give more of my time and attention, my team resources to help them grow. And so I started taking a percentage and buying equity in these companies. So I was further incentivized to grow. And that leads me to the phase of life that I'm in today, which is what I call the give back phase. I have made over $20 million online collectively with the 3 companies within my portfolio that I operate today. And it is my God-given mission to educating and helping people, number 1, grow closer to God. But number 2, I believe that there's too many Christians out there that are broke. And I believe that there should be a lot of people of faith that should be making a lot more money so they can be a lot more generous and a lot more impactful with the influence and reach that God already gave them. They just don't have the tools in order to do so. To this day now, I'm moving from chasing success to chasing fulfillment. And the fulfillment is bringing knowledge and making sure that my mentorship, the same way that my mentor took me under his wing and showed me how to build an online business successfully from the ground up, I'm now 100% dedicating my life through my free content that you're watching right now, through my mentorships, and especially through my private equity firm where I invest into my mentees' businesses, helping kingdom-based entrepreneurs and not, secular businesses as well, inspire and reach specifically through selling digital products. And so if there's any way that I can serve you, I make YouTube videos like this on a weekly basis, but look, I can't message you. There's no message feature on YouTube. Go to my Instagram. I'll leave it right here. I respond to all of my DMs. And so if you want a free course on how you can get started, I wish I had this free course. I made it specifically to serve you so you can get started with building your own digital product business. And even if you don't want to sell your own digital products, you can arbitrage and sell other people's digital products and earn up to 50% commission. Just message me on Instagram, the word YouTube. Okay, as soon as you DM that to me, I'll respond immediately. I'll send you a free course. That's my free gift to you for being here on YouTube. And I really, really hope that you see through my life, I really, really am just a normal guy, a broken, messed up, terrible sinner, saved by God's grace. The purpose of this video ultimately is to bring glory and light to the most important source, and that's Him. And if I can do it through the vehicle of education and doing so through mentoring you on building a successful business so you can go out and impact people, then so be it. So consider hitting that subscribe button, and remember that how you do one thing is how you do everything. I'm rooting for you.